If today's episode sparks any new ideas in you, please hit follow and leave a quick review for me. So I read every single one, and it helps us to get more eyes on all this great conversation we're having. On to the episode.
Action is where it's at. You can read all day, but as soon as you start doing something, you're just going to have problems that you didn't anticipate.
Welcome to another incredible episode of Purpose-Driven Progress. As always, I'm your host, Jacob Hicks. And guys, I got to really tell you, I've got a really great guest today. So I've got Nick Barrett, the founder and creator of CordBrick. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jacob. Glad to be here.
Yeah, man, really glad to have you. So, I'm sure you kind of iterated this quite a bit in the past, but tell for some of our listeners that may not know who you are, tell us a little bit about who you are and what CordBrick is.
Sure, I'm a 38-year-old first-time entrepreneur. Launched CordBrick about 5 years ago, and just had a simple problem and decided to create a product, something I'd never done before. So everything was new for me getting started in the process. Just a little bit about my backstory. I graduated from Penn State, participated in an entrepreneurship boot camp when I was pursuing my MBA, and won third place and $5,000 from that. And kind of that was where I got my start doing entrepreneurial type activities and kind of believing that being an entrepreneur was maybe something in the cards for me in the future. And then, we hit a million in sales last year and launched our second product, Desbrick. So that's kind of the quick view of where we are.
I love it, man. Well, congratulations on hitting $1 million in sales. That's a huge deal. So I want to kind of start at the beginning here a little bit because, a lot of folks that listen to the show, they are entrepreneurs in, some form or fashion. So, being an entrepreneur for as long as you've been, what kind of led you to the decision to kind of make the leap into being an entrepreneur full time?
Oh man, failing in a lot of other jobs. I think is probably the first answer to that. My first couple of jobs out of college, I remember distinctly thinking like, man, if the owner of the company would just listen more to me,
we all felt that.
Do so much better. Yeah, and I think like most entrepreneurs, they kind of think like, I've got a vision for how things should be. And then I think I can explain how to execute that and get us there. I think also probably most entrepreneurs are somewhat of perfectionists. And so they see the problems that are occurring and kind of think here, I have a solution to that.
I love that, man. So I'm really curious too, because I at least in my, in my personal journey as an entrepreneur and in a lot of discussions I've had with other entrepreneurs, like the mindset piece, I feel like, at least in my opinion, I think that's kind of the most critical part, because I think you always start like either win or lose in your mind first before anything else gets started, right? So, how do you feel like you've dealt with self-doubt or any of like the struggles you've come across in your time as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I started with tons of self-doubt. I'm 8 years sober from alcohol, and Congrats. I think, before then I had tons of that, just those negative feelings going around in my head all the time. Didn't think I was worth very much. Didn't get paid a lot from other companies, so didn't have very many reasons to think that I was extremely valuable. But I would say the entrepreneurial journey has been kind of one step of building confidence after another, and it has made me, more confident than I've ever been, and just learning new things, accomplishing things I never thought I would have fairly quickly has led to what I feel like is a tremendous boost in my confidence over the last 5 years.
I love that, man. Well, congratulations on the sobriety. So that's really fantastic.
Thanks.
So a couple of things I wanted to dive into here. So when you're talking about, like the CordBrick especially, and I know like a lot of this, like as we all know as entrepreneurs, if anybody's in the business world, like we're always learning all the time, right? And a lot of times it's like hard and fast pivots. You're like, okay, well that didn't work on social media or whatever it is, so I've got to try something different. So when it comes to, building out like a product or a feature, what like signals do you feel like you need to prioritize early on?
So for me, the thing was I'm experiencing this problem, and I think I have an idea that's different than what currently exists. And I think I've heard from other entrepreneurs that you really have to experience the problem yourself, at least in your first business. It's very difficult to try to solve a problem for someone else and create an effective solution for them, because there's so many different things that are, going into their thought process of what features they want out of it, what they expect to pay for it, what the actual problems are. Maybe they'll tell you there's a certain problem, but the problem is actually something else. And for me, I really wanted to, when I looked at the other options available for the problem that I was experiencing, I immediately thought, how can I create myself a competitive advantage? How can I, do something different with what I'm doing that sets me apart from the competition? And so I'm sure that's, something that just about every entrepreneur has realized is the thing exactly that I want does not exist.
Right.
And you can maybe put a little bit more thought into like, okay, well, it would also be cool if it had this, that, or the other thing. And so I just did some basic product research. Just looked on Amazon and looked at what the problems were with the existing solutions. Looking at the 1-star reviews mainly.
Okay.
Seeing like, what do people really not like about this product or that product? And so, okay, how could I do something different that wouldn't, they wouldn't have the same problem with? And so for example, adhesive cord holders, a lot of people, they'll buy them and try them, but they'll have problems with the adhesive. It will come off too easily. It will damage their furniture when it does come off. It'll leave some sticky residue. Just it's very limiting. Just does one thing. If you want to move where you're holding the cord or something like that, then you got to put another one down. You can't like re-stick it somewhere else. So, and then for the other weighted cord holders, which were very limited when I started, now there's a couple of them. They just did one thing. And so people were like, okay, it's great, but that's it. It just kind of sits there,
Right.
So I try to create something that kind of stays with your cord all the time and has additional phone uses too. And so those things kind of set my product apart from the others.
I love that. Well, and something I want to kind of dive into a little bit more is like the iteration piece, right? Where I feel like, I mean, business as always, as we all know, is very much experimentation, where you're trying something, figuring out, see if it works. It doesn't work, we try something different, right? So, I mean, what has been like kind of your mindset, or like what went into the decision to develop, a wider range of products from the original cord brick, like the desk brick and the glow in the dark one you have now?
Well, I think I would actually back up to the manufacturing.
Okay.
At first I tried to go right to a manufacturer without some, real prototyping. I'd bought like modeling clay at Michael's and like hand molded one that was, rubbery silicone.
Yeah.
And then I tried to 3D print one, and it was hard plastic. There weren't really like silicone printers at the time. They kind of just came out, honestly.
Okay.
And then the first design that I had, I worked through it with a manufacturer. And I think the thing that most people don't realize about manufacturers is they're not designers.
Yeah.
They don't care about the aesthetics. They just care about the makeability. Can we make it? How difficult is it going to be to make? What's the cost going to be? And while those are important things to consider, I think having the full design aspect and the look and feel, and then the functionality of the design is extremely important. And so it does take a good bit of prototyping. And after my first design failed, basically, and I had to throw away the mold and a bunch of material I'd bought, I kind of went back to square one, and I started doing that prototyping again. And we tested a bunch of different things on every model. Like with my product, what we were able to do was we were able to actually design each different channel a little bit differently on a prototype model, so that I could do just one prototype, and I could test a bunch of different ways and thicknesses of the entry point where the cord goes in, the little tapering that kind of goes on either side of the middle, how narrow it gets, how deep the channel is from the top of the brick, so how much resistance you have when you're pulling it in and out. Like these are very small details,
Right.
but actually they matter a lot in the daily usability, and then eventually like the star rating, of the customers online. When it came to additional products after that, I had heard from some people that they were looking for something a little heavier than cord brick. Now, a lot of people do like the lightweight of it, and I kind of made it the minimum viable product, right? The lightest, cheapest possible thing I could, because I realized that there was going to be some incremental, trade-off of, okay, once it gets a good bit heavier, people just aren't going to pay a lot more for it, even if it costs me a lot more. So I got to keep my costs down. And that was, also one reason I tried to start in the USA was I need to add a little bit more value than some of these people somehow, because I'm competing with China, and they compete on price. And so they're going to destroy me on price. So what can I do? I can add features, and I can, maybe add made in the USA. I didn't end up being able to do that. I ended up going to China eventually to create the product, but I had to get that cost down, and I didn't want to, get it too high. But with Desk Brick, it was, added weight, and then I had seen that people appreciated the phone stand use of cord brick. The issue is that you've got to spin the product and turn it. And so you got to kind of remove some of the cords to be
Oh
able
yeah.
to do the phone use. And so what I did was I just flipped the channels 90 degrees, which actually is still within my original utility patent, and was able to protect my next product, Desk Brick, with the same intellectual property, and then add a little bit to that on a continuation patent, and kind of add that functionality and sort of as an upgrade for Desk Brick. So not only is it heavier, but it can do more. And so then I was able to price it a little bit higher. And then with the glow cord brick, I had a glow cord brick that was transparent,
Okay.
because that's how the glow glows brightest. But we found like a new supplier that came out with these colored glows, so you can have a different variety of glow colors that look different in the light and they look different in the dark. And I was like, okay, this would be way cool. We could add a little extra value. And at the nightstand, that was kind of where my original problem was occurring, not being able to, bind my cord, it being on the floor. With the glowing cord brick, it just glows lightly, so it does not gonna like keep you up at night, but you'll be able to see it when the lights are off and it's dark. So it's like, glow can be a little gimmicky for some products, but for my product, it actually has like a use. So I thought that'd be a cool addition.
I love it, man. I love that. What a great answer. Okay, so a couple of things I wanna touch on here quickly, because I feel like when we're talking about, especially building like a business with a physical product, it can be really easy to overlook some of these things. So do you feel like if you were to go back and give yourself some advice on like the manufacturing side, do you think like making sure the design was solid before going to the manufacturer would be like that advice, or is there something else you would tell yourself?
It's hard to say. I mean,
Mm,
everything kind of happens for a reason, right? And then if you're successful, it's like, well, maybe all those things needed to happen for me to get to this point. So
sure.
I think probably the first thing I would say to people is about that prototyping. Most people, I think, are going to try to get their intellectual property way too fast.
Okay.
And the problem with that is you don't really know if you're going to change your design and you're going to change
Mm,
things about your product. And so you might have to go, excuse me, you might have to go and actually find, you redo your patent. My patent cost me $15,000 plus,
wow.
several other design patents and whatnot, several $1,000s a piece. And luckily, I have stayed with my original design in my intellectual property, so I don't have to go get a new patent. But it's tricky because as soon as you disclose your invention and your idea, internationally speaking, that's it. You need to have your patent filed before you do your full patent filed, not a provisional patent, which is what you do in the USA, but the full patent. And so, I didn't get an international patent for my original product, and I'm glad that I didn't. And I wouldn't actually recommend to a lot of people to do that, especially
Okay.
with consumer products like mine, where the biggest market's going to be the USA. And so, yeah, there's a lot of, intellectual property and strategic type decisions. But, I would say probably to myself, do a little more prototyping before
Okay.
you start worrying about the patent, because I had filed that provisional patent and put things on file in the US. And so that's obviously, findable for international patents, and so they'll see that I was working on it and stuff like that. So, but that would probably be the main thing, and then just go as fast as you can.
Mm,
I spent a lot of time probably sitting around and like researching stuff, and I needed to do more things and try more things and get more feedback from people and connect with more people and learn more about distribution and shipping and packaging, although packaging kind of doesn't come until a little bit later than people think as well. So yeah, those would be my main answers there.
I love that. Well, when it comes to the patent piece, I mean, what would you kind of think now, like looking back, like how much prototyping would you suggest somebody be doing before they start looking into the patent piece of it?
I mean, the thing about a utility patent is you can put a bunch of different designs in the
Mm,
utility patent. With a design patent, you're limited to one design, and it's just pretty much exactly how it looks. Very, someone can go around it quite easily by changing just one corner of the thing. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous how
mm,
easy they are to get around. But utility patents are a little trickier, and you can put a whole lot more in them, make a whole bunch of different claims, and then you can add continuation patents, which kind of expand on certain elements of what you've already done. But the trick is you have to kind of have something like that in the original patent. So
mm.
we did like 20 different designs and even like other aspects of it, which if you people want to look up my intellectual property, it's public information. But I'm not going to talk about them right now. But things we're working on in the future that will be little additions to the product. And we've been able to do that. In fact, we've even been able to look at new competitors that came out and then add additional intellectual property that protects my stuff, even though my stuff isn't what they created. So it's kind of a way to kind of get competitors off the market quickly. And actually, they've disappeared since I have done that.
I love it, man. I love that. Well, and there's something else you mentioned I feel like we need to make sure we touch on here. And it said you said that you wish you would have not researched as much and have done more. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, action is where it's at. I
Yeah.
mean, you can read all day, but as soon as you start doing something, you're just gonna have problems that you didn't anticipate and that no research is gonna be able to tell you. So,
Hmm.
thinking in theory is one thing, sitting in school, all that. But yeah, what do employers look at? Your work experience. So it's what you're doing.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah. Listen, anybody out there listening to this, whether you're, starting a business with a product or a service or whatever, get out there and do stuff. Like you can't just be sitting there thinking all the time. You got to get out there, try some stuff, figure out what works and what doesn't. So something else I wanted to touch on is we kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier that, you've been doing really, really well, right? Like you said, you hit 7 figures in sales last year, which is phenomenal. So what do you feel like has changed most dramatically or shifted most dramatically in your product development process as your company has grown?
I have outsourced a lot more
Mm,
of the actual design, and I have um, found a number of different designers to do different aspects of it, for varying in price for what type of work that I need. I kind of know who I can use for what aspect of that design, and then who to come to for more of a consultation and like a theory type discussion. Um, I mean, it sounds simple, but I know where to go to get a prototype now, and I didn't know where to go to get a prototype before. So that's very helpful. And I also know that I have to move very fast.
mm,
You could go through a year in no time. I mean, a test mold takes 45 days, 60 days sometimes, to make and ship. Could take less. But then creation of a mold takes a month or two, and then you've got to run some inventory, so that takes some time. So you're looking at 6 months, like if you start today, to get inventory, if not more. Then you got to put it on a boat and sea ship. So yeah, so that's like another 90 days. So yeah, so even more than 6 months, 18 months or so. So the time goes super fast. So draw a bunch of different designs, consult with someone who knows about manufacturability for
mm.
whatever materials you need, and then get prototyping, get going.
I love it. I love it. Well, and something I want to understand a little bit better because we all have like kind of our niche, right? Like as you know, like as an entrepreneur, when you first, especially when you first get started, you have to wear all the hats. Like you got to have like some understanding of like pretty much every aspect of the business. So as you've grown, how have you decided like, hey, I need to outsource the design piece as opposed to anything else?
Yeah, so something that might surprise people is I don't have any employees.
Mm,
I just have freelancers. And I think that people look to hire way too early. I mean,
yeah.
an employee is going to be your most expensive thing, pretty much, single expense that you're going to have,
Yeah.
besides inventory maybe, and seller fees and things like that just come off the top. But you really need people on a project basis. And today we've got this, freelancer economy that is great for that. Tools like Upwork and Fiverr to find
Yep.
people around the world. And it just you just weren't able to do that 10, 15 years, maybe 15 years ago. You weren't able to find, people that would work for, $7 an hour that will do this graphic design for you. I mean, USA, you're looking at $30, $40 an hour for a graphic designer, and I've got one for $10 an hour
Yeah.
overseas, and they do just the same work. So, not like I have anything against hiring Americans. I certainly have, and will continue to. But, you've got to save money and save costs, especially early on. You're going to be in the hole, almost no matter what you do,
Hmm.
for a while. So you got to figure out how to get profitable and just be as lean as you possibly can.
Yeah, so I absolutely love that advice, and I feel like it's something that people can overlook. Like you said, people they want to hire, like truly hire somebody. Like, hey, I have an employee that works for me for my business. I get there's like something to be said for that, I guess. But the nice thing you're talking about, like this kind of gig economy that we have anymore, is how scalable it is. So like if you're to have like a crazy busy day with a ton of meetings and all this stuff, you can ramp up your VA, your virtual assistant, to say, hey, I've got a lot of stuff going on. But then, 2 weeks later, you're diving in deeper into some research project or others. You don't need them as much. You scale them back. And I feel like people just miss out on that. And I think it's been hugely helpful in my business, and I'm sure it's been really helpful in yours too.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, you need someone for a short period of time to do like a project, and then you'll find, especially early on in your company, like you just don't have any work for them, and what they might do for you isn't what you need right now, and so you can really need to save the cash and use it on other things.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of taking a pivot here. So what do you feel like is the most misunderstood part of building a product that users usually stick with over time?
I guess I go back to the Steve Jobs approach of people don't know what they want. You need to show
Yes.
them.
Yeah.
Like people will do way too much asking of other people about different things and be like, oh, well, this one person said that they need this. And it's like, when you really get into it, it's like, you can't go off other people's advice. You got to either know what the right thing is to build, or you've got to get some people who actually know about that customer segment or have done a similar business before, if you really want to listen to other people. But I would recommend really not. Market research, I think, is BS for the most part. People don't know what they want, and so that would be my main thing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. People really don't have an, like you said, like a lot of times what we think as a consumer is the problem usually isn't. And a lot of times we need some sort of, like you said, somebody to tell us that, hey, you actually don't need that, you need this instead. So we're actually showing them through those things.
Yeah.
So a couple of things here. So how do you balance the short-term vision or the short-term wins versus like your long-term product vision?
Yeah, so I took this test called the Crystallizer Assessment. This organization called EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, has it, and you can go take it for free. And it tells you if you're a visionary, which most entrepreneurs are, and or an integrator. Some rare entrepreneurs are both visionary and integrators, but me, I'm very low in integrator skills, and that's the actual integration of the ideas into your startup. And so it is very tough to manage your long-term vision and things that you want to do with the day-to-day tasks and what do I need to do right now and next. Because, what your long-term vision is doesn't necessarily need to be done today. You might need to do some other tasks to get you to the next hurdle. So I kind of, knowing yourself and figuring out, how am I going to get to the next stage? What am I missing? I think it takes a lot of like self-realization,
Humility,
self-awareness, humility to be able to see your own flaws and kind of, humbly and honestly figure out what do I really need and where am I weak here.
Yeah, I love that. So I'll make sure to link that test in the show notes. That's great. So as somebody who, as you just said, is you're a visionary and you have some you're not as strong in the integration piece of it. So how have you kind of worked around that? I mean, is it a lot of like outsourcing or just kind of knowing yourself and it's like, hey, I just got to get this done?
I mean, it's a work in progress. I recently am using these new AIs with memory, which they just coming out with last week announcing. So to kind of be my integrator and understand and see if that works, because I had tried to hire some people for integrators. Integrator is a 6-figure salary type job, equity position. So I don't have the cash or the ability really to do that now. I had still looked at it and tried it, and I had some people had advised me maybe look at recently graduated college students who might be willing to do it for less. But the problem is they don't know how to integrate yet.
Yeah,
they haven't done it. So I don't really see that would be able to work for me. I need someone who has executed these types of things before in the future. But I think with integrator, you can kind of teach yourself to be a little bit better of an integrator. You can improve those skills and, because they're very measurable type things, setting yourself a schedule. Visionary, I can really get down a path that is not going to pay off right now. Yeah. And I think the integrator thing is, how are we going to do this right now? What do we need to do next? Not what do we need to do in 6 months or in a year, or what would be nice if we had. It's like, let's just move to the next step one by one. And so kind of that thinking has got me to improve my integrator skills a little bit.
I love it. Well, so that's what I talk about a lot. And on the podcast, but like with my clients too, is where a lot of people like, they don't know what's next, right? Like they're like, hey, I met this great potential client or whatever it is that, I think we really hit it off, but now what do I do? It's like, how do I stay in touch with them? Like that kind of stuff. So, I mean, that, like, just thinking of the next step is, I feel like, can be a huge win for entrepreneurs because we miss it so often.
Yeah, you've got to have some kind of process
Yeah.
involved, and you've got to build those processes out over time. Common term is SOPs, right? Standard operating procedures.
Yes.
What happens in this process? Write it out, right? And then you're going to change that standard operating procedure. What happens when I get a customer? What type of email should they receive? How do I want to store their information? Are there different types of customers? Should they get different information, et cetera?
Yeah, 100%. Well, I mean, you gotta, and again, like a lot of this is, I mean, unfortunately, I mean, you can talk to people like you said, but a lot of it's just kind of trial and error.
Yeah.
Where like you figure out like, okay, I thought that, this CRM or whatever was going to help me store my client information, my customer information, and it didn't do the job I thought it was going to do. So now I've got to pivot. I got to try something else. So, I mean, you just got to keep iterating over and over and over and over again until you are ultimately getting the business that you want and the one you want to live in.
Yeah, like you said, the trial and error part is entrepreneurship, and
Yes.
that is
Yes.
why the taking action is so important. Is because then you're doing the trial, and then you've got to see the error. And so
Yep.
if you aren't doing it, if you're just researching it, you're not going to have the trial, and you're not going to know the error.
Yes. Well, so one of my, I did another podcast with a good friend of mine now, Jimmy Bosco, and he talks about this guy Robert Tijan, who was like a big part of like sequencing like the human DNA and all that kind of stuff. And one of his sayings is just run the experiment. Like just run the experiment, just like do the thing, make 4, 5, 10 whatever mistakes, and then iterate, and then try it again, run another experiment, and do it again until again you're getting hopefully the results that you're actually driving towards. But
Yeah, you said do the thing from I don't know if you've listened to or maybe listened to Chris Williamson.
Yep. Oh
Do
yeah.
the thing, tweets it all the time. It's
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go, do it now. Stop waiting. Do it.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about entrepreneurship, how ultimately it's, I mean, it rests on us, right? Like we've got to show up, we got to do the work, we got to figure stuff out. But if you had to, build a product tomorrow from scratch, starting at zero, what are like the first, couple of people that you would want on your team, and why would you want them there?
So the first thing I would do before any people is I would go and look at my competitors right away.
Okay.
Who is already trying to solve this problem? Because almost always someone has attempted the problem, and there's varying solutions that already exist. I think it's pretty rare that you're gonna find zero solutions
Yeah.
to the problem. And if you do find zero solutions, you're probably not looking broad enough.
Right.
So that would be the main thing. And then, as I said before, I would go look at what don't people like about these things. And then, so moving to the people aspect, I would look at who knows how to make this thing, who can advise me on the materials, on the manufacturing process, on how could we simplify this and reduce the number of parts needed. I think a common mistake many entrepreneurs make is they're trying to overcomplicate a product, and they really need to reduce the parts, the utility, and even though I said before you got to add utility, I think people often overcomplicate and try to what's called scope creep, right? They try to just get too many solutions into one thing, and then you can't do the main thing that you're trying to do, and so it just becomes a big mess.
I love that. Well, if anybody's like, we do one thing well first, and then maybe iterate with some additional, solutions if it makes sense. But Nick, thank you again. This has been fantastic having you on the show. But as we kind of wrap up the episode, what's kind of on the horizon for 2025 for you guys?
Well, we've got the glowing cord bricks that just came out. So we're getting them reviews right now on Amazon. We started selling a few on our website.
Love it.
And so we're going to be pushing those throughout the year. Cool, like summer product, like glow in the dark, nighttime, fireflies, all that. And then they both make great stocking stuffers. So, a lot of our sales are done at the end of the year. And so we're preparing a lot of content throughout the year. And then I've got another product, which I'm almost ready to announce. I guess I'll mention the name of it. It's called Mug Brick.
Okay.
And so it's kind of a drink holder. So it's for your desk. So it's not quite a cord management product. So it's kind of our first iteration away from cord management. And, the purpose of that is the vision for the brand is to be brick products. And so, brick industries, brick brands, we're working on the name, but brick something.
I love it.
And so we got another brick coming out later this year, Mug Brick. And so that'll be cool just to see if we can, create something that is not a cord management product and have success with that too. And we'll go from there.
I love it. Well, Nick, thank you again. This has been it's been a fantastic conversation. Thanks again for coming on.
Thanks, Jacob. I'm really glad to have you. Or thanks for having me.
Yeah. But anybody listening, make sure to like, follow, and subscribe. I will include all the links that Nick mentioned, so you guys can find him. Super easy, and you can find the glow in the dark and then the mug brick when that comes out too. But thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.